Today's episode of the Counselling Tutor Podcast is sponsored by Web Healer. You're a counsellor in private practice and you need a website, or you've got an existing website which you need help with. Web Healer are offering Counselling Tutor Podcast listeners, that's you, £100 off the cost of a website design and build. Now, Web Healers specialize in websites for counselors and psychotherapists. It's what they do. And the Web Healer team provide a completely non-technical, done-for-you solution, leaving you to focus your time on your clients. Operating for 20 years, Web Healer are a trusted resource amongst counselors when it comes to getting your practice online. So get the package details and claim your £100 off coupon for your new website by going to counsellingtutor.com/website. That's counsellingtutor.com/website.
Hello and welcome to episode 349 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. I'm Rory and my guest today is Chloe Foster, a Pink Therapy accredited gender, sexuality and relationship diversities therapist with over 12 years of experience supporting LGBTQ plus people both as a youth worker and as a counsellor. She joins us today to discuss her specialism as a practitioner who counsels via email and to discuss a lecture she gave for the CPD library titled Introducing Email Counselling, the Written Word in Therapy. With that said, let's roll the intro.
Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for counsellors, psychotherapists, and counselling students. Here are your hosts, Rory Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and a very warm welcome to episode 349 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. My colleague Rory Oakes, myself Ken Kelly, are delighted to guide you through three topics today, starting with ethical sustainable practice, where today we're going to be speaking about supervision models. What informs your practice? Then we're going to practice matters, and I know Rory's already introduced this, but I just want to hype this a bit because it's worth hyping. Chloe Foster speaking about email counselling. This I've heard her speak, and I've seen the lecture she did in the CPD library, and it is really good. You want to stick around for this. It's stuff that we don't even think of, sounds so obvious, but is so important. And then in student services, understanding personal therapy in your counselling training. So often we get the question, why do I have to go for personal therapy during my counselling training? We're going to tell you today. We're going to put some colour between those lines. But ethical sustainable practice, this is an area of expertise for you, Rory, and you built our supervision training course, and supervision models and understanding those is quite a bit of the course. It's a bit of the heavy lifting there.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. And we have got our new correspondent is going to be chatting about this, Paul Cullen. We're going to go over to Paul Cullen, our neurodivergence and supervision correspondent, to get his ideas. But I will share mine. I'll share my ideas, Ken. I was very fortunate when I was trained, because I was trained 24 years ago, before we had such rigid curriculums in counsellor training. And one of the things that I was taught was supervision. As a student, I was taught supervision. I wasn't taught to be a supervisor, but I was taught how supervision works. Not you've got to go to supervision and these are the hours you've got to have, and this is what form you have to tick. I was taught what supervision was. I was taught the model of it, and it was mightily helpful, because when I went to see my supervisor, I had a really good idea of how she works and where we may go, where that supervision journey may take us. And it really, really informed my practice. And it informed this in a number of ways, one of which was that I was able to look at the material I was going to bring and put it in a way that made the best use of the time we had available. And I found that mightily useful. And then I fast forwarded 10 years went by, and I trained as a supervisor. And I have to say that, again, when I trained as a supervisor, revisited those theories in more depth and got a chance to practice them, it again really, really informed the way that I practiced. And it certainly tuned up my self-supervisor.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting you say that, because you're not alone, Rory. I know when we look at the feedback from our supervision training course, how many say how it's revolutionized the way that they think about their own delivery of therapy and their preparation for their own supervision, not just the training to be able to offer that supervision. And I think let's start off, as we often like to do, just with some simple definitions. So supervision, the cornerstone of ethical practice, as we know, will work to our ethical frameworks. And a supervision model, I think you've explained it beautifully, Rory. It's a kind of a map that guides how supervision works. It's the under the hood, what's actually happening. And we get so many questions in our Facebook group, which you can find. Go to Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor, and you'll find us right there, from students saying, I'm preparing to go into supervision. How do I prepare for my first supervision? What should I be taking to my supervisor? Questions like, should I be seeing a supervisor before I go into practice, or just after I've gone into my placement practice, after I've got some hours under my belt? And I think understanding the supervision models gives you much more of a clear understanding of what supervision is there to do, how it supports you, how it supports your client. And there are different models. And I guess we're going to be speaking about the 7I model. Rory, you'll be bringing that today and speaking about what that is. And that looks beyond the client-counsellor relationship. It does look at the client, does look at the counsellor, but it looks beyond that within the 7I model. And I'm sure you'll be speaking about INSCIP and Proctor, the three functions: safe, learning, and standing, or as you love to call them, Rory, the normative, formative, restorative part of a supervision model. That was one that I did during my training, Rory, because you trained me, and you covered supervision models, and it was so useful. Just that normative, formative, restorative understanding of that triangle was revolutionary for me, and I used that information in all of my presentations at supervision, Rory.
Yeah, well, you're talking about the INSCIP and Proctor model, aren't you? I think it's Bridget Proctor, if my memory serves me right. And that is very, very useful as a map to work out exactly where you're coming in. So for those who are not familiar with that model, if you think of a triangle, and along the sides of the triangle, you have got formative, normative, and restorative. And they're the doors, if you like, of how you enter supervision. So I'll give you an example. You'll think to yourself, I'm really not really good at this at all. I'm not feeling it in any way. I'm not sure how competent I am. So you go in and you tell your supervisor this, and they may use a restorative line of inquiry. In other words, what's going on for you? How do you get into these ways of thinking? And as you're kind of explaining and discussing what's going on for you, it might be that the supervisor pops some education in and says, look, what you're telling me about your struggles with this client is that you're lacking a bit of information, because we're always learning as therapists. And what about if you thought this way? Now we're moving into another area, going through another doorway of supervision, which is formative, which is information. So we've gone in thinking, we know no good at all, and now we're getting new information from our supervisor, which is kind of getting us to think, well, if I'd have gone that direction, or maybe if I'd have just had that kind of sensibility in my mind, I might have thought a bit more competently about it. I might feel a bit more secure in the work I'm doing. And then they might say, well, you've told me about this client, and you may have to make a doctor's report. How do you feel about that? Well, that's another thing that's worrying me. That's another anxiety you bring in. So then you go through another door of normative, which is a more managerial, a more kind of structured approach, a more kind of thinking, cognitive way of doing it. And it's mightily helpful. And here's the thing, Ken, that's just one model. I was taught 3 models of supervision. As I think I taught you 3 models. So that's just one model, and having that in your back pocket as you go through the door when you're sitting down with your tea in the comfy chair is mightily helpful.
So helpful. And the next topic area I wanted to go into is why it matters in counselling and psychotherapy. But just before we go there, your supervision needs are going to change as you develop in your practice, as you mature in your practice. You will need very different things from your supervisor when you just graduate or might be in placement to when you've been practicing for 10 to 15 years. And Rory, there's that question of when do I move supervisors? When does it serve me? And I almost want to say there's an app for that, because there was some joke about that some part back, but I'll park that in my neurodivergent brain and I'll say there's a supervision model for that, Rory.
Yeah, there is. And that, of course, is we talk about IDM, Integrative Development Model, which is another of the models we teach on our supervision course. So you get the Inskip and Proctor model, you get the IDM. And IDM is about where you are in your journey. It's simple as that. It's sitting down and considering where you are. And there's really 3 positions. There's apprentice, which is what you are as you come out of your training. You're really an apprentice. Yes, you've done 100 or 120 hours, the hours to get your qualification. But that's really the beginning of your journey. And your supervision will reflect that. In fact, you'll probably find that as a student, you'll have more formative information. In other words, your supervisor will be the cement between the bricks of the learning you do at college or university. They will cement that together, usually with information or kind of direction on how to work with clients. And then as you move forward through your practice and you gain more hours and more experience, you become a journey person. Now, it used to be journeyman in the books that I read many years ago, but we'll say journey person to be respectful in these new times. And you're on a journey to kind of develop and hone your skill and hone your knowledge and tune up your wisdom, top up your wisdom. That's what I would say, top up your wisdom. And then eventually you become a master craftsperson, where the supervision is really about a collaboration between 2 professionals, where you're sometimes ahead of the supervisor. There were times in my supervision, I was ahead of my supervisor, and my supervisor would say, "Well, I didn't know about this, Rory, but why don't you tell me about it? And from what you tell me, I could then kind of have a conversation with you about how you're going to apply it." It becomes more of a dialogue, and it's very different to that of being a student or even someone on that journey. And and that's very useful, knowing where you are. And then, of course, we teach the Short and Hawkins 7-eyed model of supervision, which, as I've said before on the podcast, is if you've ever been to a museum and you're looking at a piece of art, a piece of sculpture, usually you walk around it to get different aspects, to appreciate the different aspects of the sculpture. And that's exactly what the 7-eyed model is. You're looking through 7 different positions to look at how you're working with the client, where you are with the client, what the presentation is, how do you feel, and you're getting, to some extent, the feedback and the wisdom of the supervisor, giving you observation of how they may work with a client. And it's mightily useful. It doesn't half inform your practice, Ken.
Yes. So moving on to why it matters in counselling. What does it do? Well, having a model gives clarity. Models show who holds what responsibility. It reduces defensiveness, increases openness within the relationship. So it serves the relationship as well as the client, as well as you as the therapist. And the 3 jobs of supervision, really, there's kind of, it's keeping it's keeping you and your clients safe. It's looking at the ethics and the law that surround your practice. It's keeping you learning and developing and moving forward and staying current with your practice, learning the skills. And it keeps you in practice being well. So you're supported, your supervisor's watching out for how you are. Are you seeing too many clients? Are you experiencing burnout? Are you overwhelmed? Now, your supervisor's not going to be there to give you therapy, but they are there to support you through those all important aspects of your practice. And I think there's a lot that we've spoken about, and it can sound quite confusing, and that's why when you're training to become a supervisor, the ethical bodies will recommend you have at least 450 practice hours or 2 years of practice experience when you've been out there, because there is a lot to hold in a supervision relationship. You know, you're there for that client, you're there for the supervisee, but you're also there for that supervisee's client. You're also looking over the relationship. So you have to look in a number of different areas at the same time. And it takes training, it takes dedication, but it takes maturity as well, I think, in practice to be able to be there in service of someone else, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of that journey person thing, isn't it? The 450 hours is where you are not an apprentice anymore. You're a journey person. You know, you're journeying towards being a master crafts person. And that's why the 450 hours or 2 years. And by then you should have enough clinical experience to be able to be of service. That's the key here, of service to your supervisee, because we are a profession of service. First and foremost, service to clients, service to our colleagues, service to the profession. And as such, as a supervisor, that's what you're going to be doing. And that service as a supervisor is generated through your experience and your ongoing experience and your ongoing commitment to the work and CPD, which is something that you have to model as a supervisor. It's a responsibility. It's not written anywhere, but it is a responsibility.
100%. And you know, we spoke about a lot to learn there. I think it's important to remember that a supervision model is not a heavy academic theory. It's a tool. It's a map, a block that is put in place to keep your practice ethical, reflective, and sustainable. We've got a handout for this. Before we hand over to our roving reporter, Paul Cullen, I want to tell you about the handout. It's on this very topic we've just discussed, supervision models, and you can download that by going to counsellingtutor.com, click on the podcast tab, go to today's episode, and of course today is episode 349. It's free. You can download it from within that page. And if you listen to this and gone, you know what, I've been in practice for more than 2 years, I think that I'm mature enough, I would love to be a supervisor, then visit counsellingtutor.com, look on our products tab, and you'll see our supervision training course, and you can download the handbook and see if that would be a fit for you. But now to hand over, Rory, to Paul Cullen, who trains on our supervision training course, is one of our tutors on the supervision training course. He's, of course, a supervisor, and he is also our roving reporter for supervision, Rory.
He is, yes. Paul is Paul is very familiar to those in our Facebook group. He's the moderator of our Facebook group. You're going to join our Facebook group. Go to Facebook, Counselling Tutor. In you come, and you'll see Paul contributing to the community from time to time. He is our correspondent on neurodivergence, because he teaches on that course as well. And today I caught up with him and spoke about his experience of supervision enhancing his practice, and this is what he had to say. So, hi Paul, how are you?
I'm all right, thanks, Rory. How are you today?
You know, I'm very well. And as you've heard, our conversation, Paul, that Ken and myself were having was around how training as a supervisor actually informed your practice with clients, not as a supervisor, but just as a therapist. And I guess my observation is that knowing how the supervisor works, the model, allowed me just to prepare my material a little bit more, and to actively engage in it. But I wonder what your thoughts are.
Well, not totally dissimilar in that. I mean, when I first decided to train as a supervisor, and it's not something I think people should do, without some thought and consideration. But I initially thought, well, I'm going to diversify my portfolio, and I'm going to expand my practice in a different way. The benefits of actually training as a supervisor, and this is what I hadn't really kind of considered, because my initial training as a therapist was you need to go to supervision. But training as a supervisor really helped me to consider how I use supervision and really kind of develop my approach and my consideration to what I take to supervision and how I take clients to supervision. So I use the same model, and I trained in the seven-eyed model, which my supervisor is also trained in. So having that model in my head as a supervisor helped me as a supervisee to really kind of consider and prepare more thoughtfully so that I could make the best use out of that time with my supervisor.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. And on the supervision course that you run, you actually run. You're one of the trainers on the supervision course that Counselling Tutor runs. One of the things we teach is in the integrated development model, which kind of lays a pathway, doesn't it, from being an apprentice through to a master craftsperson. And
that's right. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I found very useful learning that many years ago was just finding out where I was on that journey, because it's an ongoing development, isn't it? You develop and refine your practice.
Yeah, and again, when I was attending the training myself, what I found myself doing was really kind of, when I was learning about the IDM model, the integrative developmental model, I'd kind of positioned myself at a certain place at the beginning of my supervision, practice. But through the course, through the learning on the course, again, it was able to help me kind of build and develop my own knowledge and skills, which has helped me kind of move through that model myself. And that, so not only has it, benefited me, from my practice perspective, it's benefited the clients that I work with, which again has helped me, make that better use of that supervision, and that so I can, fully integrate both those models into my practice and into the work that I do as a practitioner, never mind as a supervisor.
Yeah, I quite agree. And sometimes it just takes a bit of unpicking, doesn't it, to actually unpick what the benefits are of training as a supervisor as a practitioner. I think it refined my self-supervisor. So the ability to think in the moment when you work with client, that helicopter skill, and also to be able to articulate that in supervision.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that, I talk about in the training. I say one of the benefits of you training as a supervisor is it's really going to develop your internal supervisor, and then in turn, when you're working as a supervisor, you're helping your supervisees to develop their internal supervisor, and it's really kind of enhanced. Again, I go into supervision now with a clear idea of the clients that I want to bring, after also considering which are the clients that I don't want to bring, that I think are doing all right, because they are as worthy of discussion more so sometimes, because we're kind of looking at that potential hidden supervision or hidden clients, aren't we? So yeah, it's really kind of helped me consider my own internal practitioner, my own internal supervisor.
Yeah, I like you brought up hidden clients, and for those people who are listening thinking, what hidden clients? What are you going on about? Hidden clients are those clients that for some reason you're hesitant to bring to supervision. And I can remember as a very early novice therapist going to my supervisor, and she very wisely said, right, how many clients have you got, Rory? And I said, I've got 5 clients. And she said, right, who are you going to bring today? And I said, I'm going to bring A, B, and C. And she said, who are you not going to bring? And I said, D, E, and F. And she said, we'll talk about D, E, and F.
That's the one. That's the one. And it's one of the things that I send out to new supervisees is almost like a little checklist, a little preparation, to spend a bit of time thinking about your clients. Who do you want to bring to supervision? Who do you not want to bring to supervision? I want them to start reflecting on that, because it might be, well, I think they're doing all right, so I don't need to talk about them. Well, maybe we need to talk about what doing all right is. So I think it's really important that we kind of highlight that.
Yeah, is that, when you teach on the supervision course, is that something that ever comes up with the students who take the course, that they reflect back to you that actually it's now informing their practice?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of people, and I can confidently say that a lot of people come back after a few sessions of the live events saying, I've never been asked this in supervision. I think this is it's really made them evaluate their own supervision, whether they're getting what they currently need from supervision, but it's certainly enhancing the way they're thinking about how they want to be as a supervisor. It does kind of explore all those different aspects, which is really wonderful to see as a trainer on this course.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things that certainly came up when I taught the course was ethical problem solving. Now, in most codes of practices, be it BACP, UKCP and CPS, I'm sure many other professional bodies that fit within under the professional standards authority umbrella, that you're going to come to a point where in the room or shortly after seeing a client, you have to be able to do ethical problem solving. And there is a structure for that. I think it helps in supervision to be able to. I was taught that in my supervision training. Reinforced. I was taught it in my initial training, but to be able to have a common language in supervision when it comes to talking about ethical issues.
And there are a number of different frameworks out there to help, kind of guide that process. And again, it's something that we cover in the training that I deliver. And ironically, on the day that we were delivering that particular element of it, I had a phone call from someone and that wanting to discuss an ethical problem, and I used a framework to kind of help us do that. But it's about fostering that early on in that, building that relationship with your supervisor and with your supervisee, that there will be ethical issues that arise, and we need to be able to be open and transparent enough to discuss those so that we can ensure that we're doing the best work for our clients.
Yeah. I like the way you've put that, Paul, because, that sums up our profession, doesn't it? We're in service to the people that we see. And I think one of the things that struck me when I did my supervisor training is the normative, formative and restorative element of supervision. Now, that's sometimes unknown to practitioners because it's taught only in supervision. And for those people, or maybe you'd like to kind of outline what formative, normative, and restorative is. And also maybe why it's important that we understand that model in our own practices.
Well, I think kind of, highlighting the idea that supervision isn't about you going to someone who is going to tell you off, who is going to be punitive, but is going to support you with your own development of your modality and development of your approach and that, but also support you emotionally and socially, but also going to, at the center of, the supervision triangle, and that is ethics, and that ethics is governing everything that we do. So, I think the fact that it provides that structure around ethics to kind of, provide a safe, almost therapeutic alliance between supervisor and supervisee, so that everything can be explored in a practical, clear, and supportive way.
Yeah. I think what stuck out for me was, as a practitioner, when I had something that I was chewing over. We all chew stuff over after a session, and you kind of chewing away, and you're thinking, being able to say, what is it I need? Do I need more information on this? Do I need more of an educative, professional consultation to be able to kind of work out what's going on? It could be around ethics. It could be around procedural things. Things like sending out forms or referrals.
Legislation.
Yeah, absolutely. Or do I need a more supportive element? Is this something that has touched me where I need to be supported? It's really helpful. And also, in terms of the normative side, is there a functional issue here? Is there a more managerial issue that I need to think about? And I think if you're in private practice, that triangle of is it a kind of administrative, is it a kind of personal support, not quite therapy, but personal support, or is it something that I need to be informed about? I don't know about you, Paul, but when I learnt about that model, I was able to really structure it and be able to be really clear with my supervisor what I wanted as a therapist.
Yeah, and again, this is what kind of changes how or changed how I viewed going to supervision. I now have a clear understanding about what I want from my supervisor and what I need from my supervisor. It's before, and again, this goes back to the lack of supervisory training that I had when I did my formal training. And the information I was given then was, you need to get a supervisor. I didn't really have a clear understanding as to what that was going to be and what it was going to look like. So I just went with, these are my clients, and this is this client, and they've got anxiety, and I'm struggling with how to support them. And that was it, and it is only through, growth and development with various supervisors over the years, but then doing the training, which helped me almost see behind the curtain. When I think of the Wizard of Oz and you look behind the curtain and you look at the mechanics of supervision, it really helped me kind of embrace how I can utilize that to the benefit of the clients that I'm working with.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that more people aren't taught the functions of supervision. I taught it when I taught, and I was taught it. I was taught it, so I knew exactly. I had a good idea, I had a handle on what I needed to do when I went to see my supervisor. I think this has been a fascinating conversation, Paul. Have you got any final thoughts on just the benefits of to being a therapist by training as a supervisor?
Just that growth and development of myself, and again, one of the other kind of hidden benefits of training as a supervisor, I started getting inquiries from students who were going into their first year of practice. Now, as I've heard you say in many podcasts, Rory, students are at the top of their game, they're at the top of their modality, and they've been immersed in theory. And that's something that I hadn't kind of considered for a number of years since I've done my formal training. So it kind of really encouraged me to delve back into theory, reconnect with that theory and that reconnect with Rogers and that, the 7 stages of process and that, the 19 prepositions. So again, it just kind of gave me that kick that I needed to go back and revisit and relearn and that, so I could better serve them, better serve myself as a supervisor, and again, better serve my clients.
So training as a supervisor for you was a win-win then?
Absolutely. But there were hidden wins that I hadn't considered at the beginning when I decided to do it. So it was almost like an added bonus.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. So Paul Cullen, our supervisor and neurodivergent correspondent, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, and it's back to you, Ken.
Thank you to our roving reporter, Paul Cullen, and of course to you, Rory, for bringing the all-important topics, and that is our ethical, sustainable practice. Remember, you can get the handout for this topic by going to counsellingtutor.com, clicking on the podcast tab, episode 349. If you're interested in training as a supervisor, counsellingtutor.com. The information is under our products page. Moving now on to our practice matters. Practice matters I love, and today I specifically like it because we have got Chloe Foster. I watched a lecture that she did, which is now in our CPD library, and it's on email counselling, and it broadened my perspective. And I did formal training in email counselling, and I went quite deep in that training. But Chloe, the way she brings it over and the stuff she shares is really, you're going to get so much from what you're about to hear. And if you are a member of our CPD library, log in and watch her lecture because it is phenomenal. It really is. Rory, you met up with Chloe.
I did, and she talked about was in this lecture, and also she shared a few other things that maybe wasn't in the lecture. So I caught up with her, and as always, this is what she had to say.
Practice Matters is proudly sponsored by the Counsellor CPD Library. To access top quality, relevant continuing professional development for your practice that you can do at a time that suits you, and all for less than the price of a cup of coffee, visit counsellingtutor.com.
My guest today is Chloe Foster, an experienced online practitioner who to some extent follows in the footsteps of Sigmund Freud, who famously corresponded by letter with Herbert Graf, the father of Little Hans, very well-known case for those of you who have ever studied psychology, guiding the father on how to observe and report his son's phobia, I think, of horses, and developing what is now known as asynchronous communication not in real time. She joins us today to share insights from her lecture, The Written Word in Therapy, Introducing Email Counselling, which she produced for the Counsellor CPD Library. So, Chloe, it's good to have you back again, and good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
No problem at all. And I guess, this asynchronous communication or therapy by text or by email or letter really does follow in the footsteps of Freud, who did that on a couple of occasions, I believe.
Absolutely, yeah. It's been going for a long time, and some people they hear about it and they think it's something brand new, and because they've not heard about it before, and it's probably not been mentioned in their initial training. But yeah, it's been going for a long time. Yeah.
And, I guess for those who've studied psychology, they may remember the case of Little Hans. Now, what first drew you to working with email counselling, and is it a fit for certain client groups or certain types of clients?
Okay, so firstly, what first drew me, well, I'd never heard of it initially, like many of my peers. When I initially did my training, I qualified in 2016, and soon after that, one of my counsellor friends had gone off and done some online counsellor training, and I was like, "Ooh, what's that?" Because back then, pre-COVID, it was less of a thing to do any kind of online counselling, wasn't it? But this person's online counselling had covered text-based counselling as well, including email counselling. And I was really intrigued, but also pretty sceptical. And I was like, I was really like, honestly, like, how on earth could that work? And she challenged me to give it a go as a client. So I did. And it was a really good experience as a client. So I come at this from a client perspective. And I think that with any kind of new or different way of working with clients, I think it's really important to get into the client's shoes and to see how does it actually feel. Of course, it doesn't work for everyone, all different types of counselling. But for me, email counselling worked really well. And for some of the reasons that it does for clients that I've worked with too. So the second part of your question, when you asked me, who does it work well for? I think it works really well for people who need more time and space and flexibility to have their sessions. Maybe they work shifts, or their parents or carers, and they can't commit to a set time during the working day. So from a practical level, it can work really well. But it can also work really well for people who need more processing time, who find it really hard to answer how they're feeling in the moment, or to think about a question that their counsellor might ask them. And that really worked well for me. And I work with lots of neurodivergent clients who like all of these things too. This kind of the flexibility, the need for more processing time can work really well. It can work really well for people who find it really awkward and they get really embarrassed about talking about certain topics or things that they never said before. So it works for lots of different people, young, old, all different ages as well.
Yeah, yes, I can see there's a variety. I thought we may go down the route of neurodiversity, but I'm so glad that you've expanded on the types of people that might benefit from it.
Yeah,
and I guess that some counsellors may be listening and saying, well, there's not real time interaction. It's not synchronous. I say something, client takes it in and then comes back, and it's real time communication. So, what do you think are the unique strengths over maybe phone or video counselling? I know you've touched on some of them, but is there anything that really stands out that email counselling does that perhaps phone or video sessions might not?
Well, I think the fact that it's not synchronous, like you say, it's asynchronous, so we do have that time delay, is a real unique difference that can be really, really powerful. If you think about the fact that often, many of us, myself included, if you have something really difficult that you want to say to a family member or a friend or something, it's usually easier to send it in a text or to say it in an email than to find a way to say it out loud. So for me, in my practice, I noticed that many clients, when they might start perhaps on video sessions and then they might switch, or vice versa, but when they switch to email counselling, I notice often it going deeper. Clients feeling more able to voice the things that they might have found really hard to say out loud. And it might be that we switch back to video, and that flexibility is really helpful for people, but they're able to really go into stuff deeper. And the fact that we can't see each other's faces or body language actually can often be a real positive thing, a really helpful thing, because it takes all that away.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So there's a definite change in the therapeutic process when you go to asynchronous communication, when you're doing text or email based counselling, and it kind of leads me on to thinking in counselling, online counselling training, which Counselling Tutor actually do provide. We have an online and telephone counselling course. Is that we talk about the disinhibition effect and how people become disinhibited and may talk on things they wouldn't usually talk about. But what we never discuss in face-to-face counselling is people being inhibited.
Yes.
We never talk about the inhibiting effect of sitting in front of someone. So, I guess what I'm saying is the disinhibition effect can sometimes be quite a positive thing, can't it? That's what I'm hearing.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a really good way of putting it. And it's interesting why people say things like, email counselling might not work for everyone, or there's pros and cons, and they might talk about it like that. And it's like, hang on a minute, what about face-to-face counselling? It might not work for everybody. There's pros and cons too. And it's really great to have the variety and the choices, and not the kind of automatic, like this is the gold standard way for things to work, because it's not for everyone. We know that.
Yeah, absolutely, and we should have a practice that where we can, and I'll come to that, where we can, suits all clients. Now, it's well known, anybody who's listening to this will know that I am dyslexic. I'm probably the most famous dyslexic therapist in the world, because I've told people often enough. My written skills are appalling. I talk better than I write, and some people say I don't talk well at all, but I talk better than I write. What would you say to someone who's thinking of doing online text-based or email-based counselling? How nuanced does the written communication have to be?
I think that it is. I'm not sure what you mean by nuanced written communication. Sorry, maybe you can clarify your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm thinking that it takes me ages to write.
Okay.
To write anything that makes sense to anybody.
Okay.
And which is why I never did email, because it takes me a long time to process the written word.
Okay. So it may be that for some people, and you might be one of these people included, that it might not work very well for you. And I think that's really important to check out, just like it might not work well for some clients. I have a free quiz actually on my website. I think the link's in the lecture that I give as well, that helps people identify, other counsellors identify if this way of working will work for you. And one of those things is really important to sort of reflect on is whether the written word or the spoken word works better for you. How do you prefer to communicate? For example, do you really love journaling? Is it a way that do you do long process notes? Is the written word something that you get deep emotion and connection from that you do usually in your life? So if that's the case, then that might be a sign that it could work really well in your practice too. But if you're the kind of person that's like, love phone calls, love voice notes, you hardly ever write, and it's just not really the way that you like to communicate in general, then email counselling, maybe not so much. I mean, obviously there's way more reasons, but it's thinking about which ways of communicating fit well for you as a person, first and foremost, before you're thinking about the actual, obviously, specialist skills, because we can't just suddenly think, oh, I'll just start writing emails to my client, because that's obviously going to be very, it's getting to very messy waters and complicated because there's so many things to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to take that quiz, you go to counsellingtutor.com, click on the podcast tab, go to episode 349. Her website will be in the show notes and you'll be able to navigate to that quiz. One of the things that's just literally struck me as I'm thinking about the written word is, how is AI now coming into email counselling? Because I'll be honest, when I do my show notes, I use AI to try and make sense of what I write. I guess the question I'm asking is there a danger that some therapists may rely on AI to communicate with the client? And if so, how congruent is it?
Oh, okay. Now that's really important that we're thinking about AI in the counselling profession carefully. That yes, AI can be really helpful for our admin and for our marketing and things like that. But when it comes to client work, we have to be incredibly careful, because we're not going to be sharing any of that confidential stuff with AI, just like we wouldn't have supervision in the middle of a cafe. Like we just wouldn't, there'd just absolutely be no question. Maybe we could talk about some of our marketing ideas with a coffee, with a counsellor friend in the middle of a cafe. That wouldn't really matter because it's not confidential stuff. So I think it's really important that we absolutely do not ever share any client material on social media, AI, anything like that. And just because it's a written word doesn't mean that we can use AI to help us, because that would be, well, it would be breaking contracts. We wouldn't be covered under insurance like GDPR. It would cause loads of complications and problems. It just obviously would not be okay. I think sometimes people think, oh, why would a client want to do email counselling? Couldn't they just ask an AI app their questions and get some kind of response? Yes, I suppose they could, and there are kind of those kinds of apps out there. However, they are not a trained human. They're not a trained counsellor human. So the responses they get are going to be things that are lifted off of Google, really, and there'll be very generic responses. There's no therapeutic connection and relationship built. when we work with email counselling, I'm not just writing emails to my clients, I'm building a therapeutic relationship and I'm connecting with that client in a similar way to I would if I was speaking to them. And that's why we would never use AI, because we're connecting and we're listening to our emotions and our senses inside ourselves as counsellors. And we're using those skills, we're building on those skills, which is why specialist training, my specialist training that I run is only for qualified counsellors, because I believe we need those foundational skills to then build on it.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. You wouldn't go into a therapist who all of a sudden put on an American accent and started to talk in an accent that wasn't theirs. Yeah. And I guess the same thing is your voice in the written word. And I guess that brings me back to a kind of contrary view. What would happen if the client was writing in AI? How might that kind of skew the therapeutic connection?
Oh, that's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. I suppose I would wonder why they might feel they need to. And would it be something that they've disclosed to me, or is it something that I maybe am sensing by the way that it's been written? Is their writing changed from how they usually write? Maybe they're feeling awkward or finding it difficult. And I think that could be something that we could explore together. I think it would be very unusual, very odd if they did do that, because it wouldn't be their stuff, really.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine a case why somebody would want to do that, because then they're spending their money and their time wanting to see a counsellor, but then they're getting someone else to compose the email.
Yeah.
If somebody is really unsure and uncomfortable at writing emails, then it's unlikely that they would choose email counselling to start with. So it's something that I've never even come close to experiencing. But it's an interesting thing to think about.
It is, because I think once there's a useful tool, people tend to use it whether they need it or not. And I met people who write really, really well, who said, I've just popped it in AI just to tidy it up. And I guess it's the same thing, where a client comes in and comes from Burnley in Lancashire, and all of a sudden decides to talk in a Texan accent. there's a degree of incongruity there, and maybe it doesn't happen. Maybe it's one of those areas of therapy where people who are drawn to writing will be drawn to it because of it. I've got a colleague who is a brilliant writer. She's a brilliant person all over, but her love is literature and writing. And I look at her writing and I'm blown away, because I could never do that. The written word it's a real skill, isn't it? It's like playing a musical instrument, certainly in a dyslexic's world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's really important then, when we start working with clients, whether it's right from the get-go that they're having email counselling right from the start. I mean, maybe we never see or hear the clients, or they're switching from starting to work with us in a different way, that we make sure that it's very clear that it's not about writing a perfect academic essay. It's just an extension of writing some kind of journal, and it can be really informal. And in fact, it's better if it's not perfected, that they don't worry about the spell check and stuff. Obviously, it still needs to make sense, but spending lots of time editing on it, that's something I would say to clients is actually less helpful. It's better if they write from what do they really need to say and just get that sent, because that is actually going to help me understand more where they're at, because some of the perhaps chaos in the way that they're composing it will help me feel and sense what's going on for them, just in a similar way to a client comes into a session and starts speaking. If they're talking in quite a chaotic and confusing way, that gives us as counsellors a sense, doesn't it? It makes us feel like, okay, this is a very confusing and complicated feeling that's going on for them.
absolutely. And I guess that's something you might discuss in initial contact. Would your contacts always be written? So would you have maybe a verbal conversation first, or are there cases where it's all done by text?
It's up to the email counsellor. In the trainings that I run, I explore this with counsellors to how do they want to start. Do they feel more comfortable inviting the client in to have like an online or telephone session first, or do they want to start straight away with the written word, or do they want to have a few sessions on video session first and then switch? I personally, in my private practice, would never push a client to come to do a video session or a telephone session first if they've chosen email counselling. I give it as an option, but I would absolutely be able to, and have done many times, started and continued only in the written word. Because I feel like if we push our clients too much to have to speak to them first, that might take away the very reason that they want to have email counselling. They might not want us to see what they look like. They might have a lot of shame about their body size or their accent or the way they look, or they might just feel so nervous that they find it's really hard to speak out loud. They might have speech impediments. There might be all sorts of reasons that they might not really want to share at that point. And email counselling feels way more accessible. So by pushing them to have to speak and meet me, inverted commas I'm doing, for those of you can't see, I feel can take that away.
Yeah, absolutely. And you did allude to specialist training in this. Yeah. A lot of people do online and telephone counselling, but I think that email and text counselling is a speciality in its own, as we're beginning to see through the arc of this interview. So tell me a little bit about what you offer in terms of training.
Okay, yeah. So the specialist training that I run is with Email Counselling Academy. And it covers a whole range, really, of different things that you need to know to be able to work as an email counsellor. There's lots of case studies and practice to really build your therapeutic skills. There's step-by-step processes, so you're not kind of get your first client email and thinking, no, I don't even know where to start. There's steps to follow to know what to do to draft your email and to get ready to send it. There's lots of stuff around contracting, boundaries, endings, and endings is a really big difference in text-based therapy. Who writes the last email and how is that going to feel, not having that synchronous goodbye? Yeah, there's loads of different things. We have the recorded, part of the course is recorded, and part of it's meetups and supervision and practice sessions. So there's a real mix of different things for different learning styles, which is something that seems to work really well for many counsellors. Yeah. And it's open to qualified counsellors, like I think I said earlier,
sure.
Because we build on those foundational skills that people already have from their initial training.
Yeah, so they've already given people a link, listeners a link to your website. So follow on that if that's there that interests you. I'd also wonder, as I picked up on you saying, that supervision, of course, suitable supervision for email counsellors would be someone who did email counselling, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. So at the moment I run group supervision so that people can learn from each other and from me. And I think that can work really well, particularly in the early days of people practicing as an email counsellor. It's certainly something that worked really well for me when I was doing my training, my very initial training back 2014 to 2016. In-person counselling. Having group supervision worked well because I could learn from other people and not just the supervisor. So that's built into the course and also offered ongoing to have the opportunity to have that specialist supervision because your usual supervisor may not have ever had any experience of email counselling, so wouldn't be suitable to be able to supervise you on something that they don't know anything about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think very wise words in any form of supervision for specialities. Choose a supervisor who has that speciality. And finally, what do you hope that the listeners will take away? Those of you the lecture, what do you hope they'll take away from it?
Oh, I love this question. I hope that they'll take away a kind of an open mind to how counselling can be different. It doesn't have to be the traditional in the room, box of tissues, clock, and then that simulated online within a similar, I know it's very different on a video call, but it's similar enough to be like, actually, no, we can do walk and talk, we can do art, there's loads of different animal therapy. There's loads and loads of different types of therapy and different things, music that work for different clients. And written therapeutic writing is one of those suites of different ways that we can think about offering. And I think that the more that counsellors are able to think about offering different ways of working and specialising in different ways, we can create a better service for our clients, because traditional ways of working won't work for all clients. And then there's clients sitting, waiting and wondering and wanting to have counselling, but they have never found the thing that suits them.
Introducing email counselling, the written word in therapy, is available as a lecture now in the Counselling CPD library. It just remains for me to say, Chloe Foster, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Chloe Foster. Thank you, Rory Lees-Oakes, for holding those all-important discussions. You'll have heard Rory's mentioned it. It's been mentioned before, but Chloe's lecture is available in the Counsellor CPD library. Not a member, counsellingtutor.com. Click on our products tab, and the information is there for you. But moving on to Student Services now. Student Services is sponsored by Counselling Skills Academy. Can't tell you how many times Rory and I have heard counselling students say that learning skills and knowing that they're using them effectively is really, really challenging. The reason for this is because we don't get to see another counsellor using skills in a real live session. In reality, this means that we're asked to learn something that we can never see demonstrated in a real setting, and it's no wonder that many of us are left feeling unsure. If you want to see counselling skills used in real sessions by qualified therapists, so this is real sessions, real presentations, and real use of skills, then go to counsellingskillsacademy.com. There's some free videos on skills, including a full live session that you can have a look at. Gain the competence and the confidence of knowing you're using your counselling skills effectively. Just visit counsellingskillsacademy.com. And in student service, we recognise you, students, on your formal journey to become a counsellor, psychotherapist, or to learn skills that you might use in a different profession. And one of the requirements, if you kind of go into placement and you're actually working with clients, it is likely that your course is going to require, can't speak today, it's going to require you to do some personal therapy. And so many ask why.
Yeah, it's true. And it's a bit of a gotcha question from students as well, because all through the training, up until they're asked to go into therapy, they're told that you cannot be sent for therapy. And then you send them for therapy effectively to qualify. And they say, well, that doesn't sound right, Rory, because you've been telling me for the last 2 years that you can't send people to therapy. So I think the reason that we ask students to go to therapy is because when you come into your practice years, sort of diploma and above, where you're going to be working with clients, it's very, very, very intense. It's incredibly intense. And what happens is to be quite honest, you become unpacked. The theories and the personal development and working with clients, a lot of students really, I want to be really respectful here, but really aren't prepared for the changes that they'll have in their worldview or themselves. And the personal development group is really useful for people to voice that. But personal therapy is a way of kind of delving deeper into what's going on, what changes are going on for you. And I've lost count of the times where I've had students saying, oh, so we got to be sent for therapy now, Rory, after you've told us for 2 years that we don't have to. And I said, well, give it a chance. And after about a month, they come back and they go, I never realised there was so much for me to look at. And it's because, I think it's because of the intensity of the training. And it is intense. If it's done properly, it's a life-changing and life-affirming journey for many. It was for me, and I think I can speak for you, Ken. It was for you. And you need some form of outlet for that. And I've counselled students from other courses who have been asked to go to therapy, and it usually starts off with, well, I've been sent part of my course. We both have a good laugh about it. And within a couple of sessions, we've gone from, well, I'm here because I have to, I was thinking the other day, this is what's happening for me. This is what's going on for me. This is how I'm changing as I'm going through the arc of my training. And there's some meaningful work to be done. Really is some meaningful work. And it was a side, until I went into private practice, Ken, it was a side of the training that I never saw. And until I actually was involved in it, I didn't realise its value. It is really valuable, just as supervision's valuable.
It is. And I would hope that your course would have prepared you in such a way that by the time it is required that you step into your own personal therapy, you'll realise that therapy is not just there for when you've tried every other option and it's failed and you're a person who can't run their life properly, so now you have to go to another human being. You'll be looking at therapy as a growth opportunity, which it is. The whole point of that is for someone to grow within that. And a lot of that growth it's internal, it's personal growth that a client goes through. You in your counselling training will have worked on your own personal development. And quite honestly, going in and doing your own personal therapy is like personal development on steroids. If you find the right counsellor who really matches up with you, it really is. And it is in protection of you as the therapist, and it is also in protection of the clients that you're about to see. And I think of it this way, as counselling students, we very rarely are able to watch another counsellor do what we do because of confidentiality. And it makes a lot of sense. I mean, you can go online and you can look at the old videos like Carl Rogers and Gloria, or you can go online and you can even see some therapists that will simulate therapy. But as you'll know from simulating skills sessions with your peers, it's different when you're in front of a client. It just is. There's something that plays out that is different there, and you get to experience that by going for your own therapy. And I think of it like this: you wouldn't want a master chef preparing food for you that they hadn't tasted themselves. It's part of the process of feeling what it is like to be there. Now, what is interesting is when you go through this process, you may discover stuff that comes up for you that may be from the course, as you suggested, Rory. It may also be that you've just taken your first steps into placement and clients are coming and they're bringing a topic or an area of their lives that resonates with something that you might have experienced or a family member might have experienced. And that can be quite a jolt. So what do you do with that? Well, yes, of course, we would take it to our supervisor, but very often the supervisor would say, this is why your personal therapy is there, because there are certain things we need to work through ourselves to be pure in our relationships with our clients. And I sometimes see on those questions around why do I have to go into my own personal therapy, I sometimes see people suggesting, I don't think that I've got any massive traumas or anything big that I need to work through. And that is an indication that when you look at yourself, you don't see any deep, dark stuff there. But it's very interesting that sometimes it can be subconscious, and it comes out only when you start speaking to a fellow professional who kind of is there holding you. And within that relationship, within that therapeutic relationship, it is astounding what can come out, where you can find yourself going. And I know within my student, when I was a student, I had to go for my therapy. I'd often be driving back from my therapy session thinking, wow, I didn't expect that. And that's the whole point of it. It's there to support you, give you an indication of what this feels like, being a client, but it also protects you, and it protects your client because of the reasons that I've shared.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. And I'll let the listener into a little secret. I was not the same person that came out after 60 weeks of training. I did a 2-year diploma, so 64 weeks. I was not the same person who went in by any stretch of the imagination. My life and my personal outlook had changed beyond recognition. And the things that I went in worrying about became distant memories. And as I came out of my training, including the therapy that I had, I became a different person. I'd like to think I became a better person, both for the people around me and for myself. I think that's something that's sometimes missed. You can be more kinder to yourself. But here's the thing, and this is the big secret. I taught countless amount of students through my tenure as a lecturer, and I would see them come in, and they would come in to my diploma class, and they weren't the same people who left it. They made changes in their lives. You could hear it in conversations where they weren't going to put up with stuff anymore. Some people parted from their partners. Some people had some quite striking revelations about messages they were given as children about who they were, and pushed back against that and became the person that they are. And I think for me as a trainer, that was the most rewarding part of being involved in counsellor training. Yes, I was training people to be really effective therapists and serve others. I've always said that as a trainer, our first priority was clients, ultimately, when people got into the diploma year. But it was tempered by the fact that the people who left were complete people. They were whole people, and they went on to go into their lives. And only this week I caught a post on our Facebook group of one of those people who has celebrated 10 years in practice, and it was a joy. It was a joy to be part of her journey, and I'm sure a great majority of that was completed in the therapy that she undertook. So it's a completion. Lean into it. I know it costs money, and I know it costs time, and why do I have to do it? And there's nothing wrong with me, but just give it a go. Just lean into it, and I think you'll find that with what's going on for you in the training, it'll make complete sense, and it'll be a great benefit.
Yeah, and so many counsellors offer student rates because they understand it and they've been through it themselves. I certainly did when I was in practice. And I have a secret for you too. So you've shared some secrets, Rory. I'm going to share a secret as well. And the secret that I want to share with you is the topic we're discussing is understanding personal therapy in counselling training. So as a student within your training, that you're called to do. But here's the secret. You will be potentially called into therapy many times after your training as well. And that may be called by your supervisor who suggests that, or it might be something that just comes up with you. You're thinking of something one day and you go somewhere and an emotion comes up, or something you recognize within yourself, or it might be something that comes up when you're working with a client. And we want to know and see entering therapy as a strength. It is something we do to strengthen our practice, not a weakness that kind of goes right back to the beginning of where I started, looking at the opportunity to go into therapy as an incredible growth opportunity for you and your practice is the way to look at this. So there it is. That is today's student services, Rory. Anything just to kind of put the dot at the end of this?
Well, I think that make the best of that great opportunity. You know, I've said before, and I'll say it again, that all the events, the most significant events in my life, obviously, you know, getting married, birth of our child, my grandchildren, of course. But my training was a absolutely change of direction and an enlightenment for me. And part of that was personal therapy. And I've had personal therapy since. And, you know, the journey goes on, you know, as part of our journey to master craftspeople. That journey's never ending. And that's the exciting bit, because you never know what's around the corner. And being able to access therapy to kind of make sense of it is very, very different than speaking to a friend. So that would be my final word on it, to be honest.
And on that final word, it's just left for me to say this has been episode 349 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. We are so delighted you joined us.
Absolutely. So we started off with ethical and sustainable practice, supervision models, how it informs your practice. And we we heard from Paul Cullen, who is our external correspondent on supervision and neurodivergence. And don't forget, there's a super duper handout, counsellingtutor.com. Go to the podcast tab, hit 349, and that handout's waiting for you right there. In Practice Matters, we had a great interview with Chloe Foster, an interview about email counselling. And as Ken said, highly enlightening and discussing an area of online work which doesn't get enough light shone on it, in my view. And then finally, student services, understanding personal therapy in counsellor training. Hopefully we've pulled the curtain back, lifted the veil, turned on the lights, I'm using all the metaphors here, to see the benefit of having personal therapy while training as a counsellor. And finally, thank you for your shares, your subscriptions, and your comments. They mean a lot to us. So until the next time we meet, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode by visiting counsellingtutor.com.